Hello, everyone. Welcome to Online Seller UK podcast. My name is Prabhat. I'm founder of Online Seller UK, and we help sellers sell better on Amazon. And we are doing this series of podcasts with various industry leaders to help online sellers sell better on Amazon in the UK or internationally. So in this context, today I've got Blair, and Blair will be talking about how to expand into Amazon Canada. So I'll let Blair explain what you do and what sort of work you do. Let's start with that, please, Blair.
Yeah. I appreciate you so much for having me on as well. So you said, my name's Blair. We help businesses sell on Amazon Canada. So predominantly what we do is the full warehousing, fulfillment, logistics, and shipping for receiving your products and then rerouting them over to Amazon's fulfillment hubs. So we do a full suite of fulfillment solutions, but the real core bread and butter is really built on that Amazon FBA prep model. So we hundreds of thousands of units coming in, we label, we handle, and then we ship it off to Amazon Canada. So I think the conversation provides, it's always exciting when new businesses want to expand to the Canadian market. We hear a lot of the pros and we hear a lot of the cons. So I try to demythicize some of it to make it a clear solution for businesses. But the major benefits is there's so many opportunities at the Canadian market that both UK businesses and I think US businesses alike, they usually just don't see the value because they think maybe it's just too small of a marketplace. Maybe it's not worth the expansion strategy. And I very much try to disregard it because there's a huge opportunity on the Canadian market that just a lot of businesses selling on Amazon, I think they just completely disqualify the Canadian market when there's a really grand opportunity there. So I hopefully want to run through some of the benefits of doing so and how people can hopefully get over the quick hurdles that usually stop those businesses from getting on it.
Yeah, excellent. So so a lot of people could be selling on Amazon US or could not be selling on US, right? So so what sort of expectation can we put in the Canadian market? So if we are selling, say, a certain volume here, so are we saying, okay, we can have a 10% of that volume in Canadian market? What sort of value do you suggest there?
Yeah, so I usually give the example of US sales. So from a UK standpoint, it's very similar to a one-to-one from what we've seen, or just a little bit less. But when it comes to the US, and you probably have a lot better idea from the UK standpoint, from a US, you can usually see around 10 to 15% of your sales going into the Canadian market. And it very much is depending on the category. The way I really like to visualize the Canadian Amazon market is essentially going back in time a couple years to visualize Amazon.com, maybe 2017. So a bit of the early stone ages from what it looks like from the Canadian market. But so main categories are really booming. Areas like that are hyper competitive on the US are really booming on the Canadian, like industries like supplements, for example. Huge opportunity on the Canadian market, hyper competitive in the States, but really lucrative opportunity in the Canadian market that it's just not the same. So because of that, I like to visualize it almost as taking a couple years back in time and visualizing like a 2016 to 2018 Amazon USA. But a good foundation is around 10%, maybe 15% of your sales can come from a Canadian market or additional growth from expanding to the Canadian market.
Excellent. So the sooner the better, I would say.
Bingo. Yeah, and I think a lot of businesses they usually just don't know when to expand. Some businesses try to go right off the bat and they'll do the UK, the US, and the Canadian market. And I think they kind of just information overload and they don't make progress in any of the different areas. And I think your approach, there are different Amazon marketplaces as you probably see on the UK. It's just there's a very different approach you have to do from the UK to all of Europe to the US and also to Canada. So I think a really hard thing is when do businesses actually expand? And I think you hit it on the head. I think the sooner the better. And I don't think there's a certain number that people need to be looking at. But the second that you want to be boosting up sales by 10 to 15%, which for some businesses is a huge deal, adding just a Canadian market, which very small barriers of entry to get into the Canadian market can really be that factor to push you from a certain percentage up another 10 to 15%. So in my opinion, it's very much a no-brainer. I think if a business is selling and they can do it, it will take a week or two to get everything set up. So it's no crazy setup to do so. And if it can boost your sales, and then it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, so you started in the right topic, so setting up. So what sort of things, we need to send this stock to Amazon Canada. Then that's one issue we need to resolve, and also opening of account. So let's start with opening of account. Is it very straightforward? What sort of legal documents do we need?
Yeah, the process is unbelievably simple. They've made it for a lot of businesses that are even from an international standpoint,
Yeah,
that you can have like a non-residential business. So if you're operating in the UK, if you're operating in the US, they very much try to make the barriers of entry for the Canadian market unbelievably minimal. Just because a lot of businesses from the US want to expand to the Canadian market because it's the next door neighbor,
yeah,
and they saw beforehand just the complications of doing so just didn't make sense. So
yeah.
Amazon made it from a registration standpoint, I think probably the easiest market to sell on. So because of that, it's just made it unbelievably simple. So registration, whatever country you're in, you can set up with the same documents for the most part. So it's very standpoint. A lot of the barrier that comes from entering the market is in regards to the shipping standpoint.
Yeah.
So people think because it's a new country, because maybe some of the limitations in the US or the UK in terms of some of the trade barriers involved, they think if you ship your products to the Canadian market, it's a whole different field of world that you're dealing with.
Mhm.
It's just not the case. So there's
Okay.
a very specific thing called an NRI, which is just a non-resident importer. And basically, you can get it within 24 hours. Like we have a partner broker that just helps us get it set up. So if we want to ship on Tuesday, by Wednesday, we can have this thing called an NRI, which just in layman terms, it just helps you become a non-resident importer.
Yeah.
So meaning that a business in the UK, if they get an NRI, that's all they need to ship their products in. So within 24 hours, you can get your NRI, and then we just help out get the actual clearance set up, and then you're off to the races. So everything said and done from a setup to actually just getting the NRI, it's less than a week task. So it's nothing crazy, and I think people think it's rocket science to get over the Canadian, or maybe it's just there's too many hurdles and it's just too difficult to do so. So we're trying to break down some of the noise that comes with expanding to a smaller market to kind of really outweigh the pros and cons of doing both.
Okay, excellent. So once the setup is done, the shipping is done. Let's bring you in perspective. So what do you guys exactly do? So if we send the stock to you and you send to Amazon Canada, is that how it works?
Yeah. So essentially, what we do is we're the middleman in a lot of the logistics. So we'll help with the shipping, getting it to our warehouse. We'll help with the brokerage, importing it to our warehouse, and then we'll also just help with the general FBA prep guidelines. So the receiving, the labeling, the poly bagging, the handling. Most of the guidelines are very specific to the Canadian market. So there's very specific things to do on the Canadian market from a handling standpoint that are just a little bit different than the US and the UK. So we just receive it, we'll handle it, we'll prepare it, and then we ship it off to Amazon's fulfillment hubs. So it's a very simple process for the most part. It's we're very much just the middleman and routing it. And I like a lot of businesses when they expand to the Canadian market, they're usually asking our opinion on what works on the Canadian market. And I think I really quickly went over it before on some of those major categories. If you're selling in those top like 8 major categories, you have a really good chance of hitting home. The categories that are slowly growing are the smaller ones like industrial scientific and some of the more niche ones, but
Mhm.
the pets, the supplements, the baby products, home and household, these are all major players on the Canadian that if you have a product in there, it's a really good opportunity. And I think what a lot of businesses tackle on the Canadian market is because it's a lower volume game, what they do is they expand across a larger SKU count. So in the UK, for example, if you have maybe that 3 to 5 top selling SKUs,
Yeah.
in the Canadian market, you'd probably bring that up to maybe your 15 to top 20. So instead of having like 3 to 5 listings that do maybe 10 to 50 units a day, you have
Yeah.
maybe 10 to 20 units that do 2 to 5 sales a day on the Canadian market. So it's a little switch on your strategy of how you're doing it, but
Yeah.
the long tail approach on the Canadian market is usually the easiest way to kind of navigate it through.
Yeah, no, you're right. With the inventory as well, it's good to have a larger selection sometimes and a longer term approach.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
And I think it just depends on the market, right, Prabhat? I think depending on what scenario you're in, on the US and UK, I think because you have the Germany market too, it's sometimes the home run products are not too far away. But on the Canadian market, just it's a long tail game, and the more products you can sell, maybe 1 to 5 units a day, it's usually the most strategic approach we've seen from a lot of private label businesses.
Yeah, excellent. So I think, and then now the crux down to, so when the stock is there, the product launch process. I know you are very experienced in launching the product PPC side of things.
Sure.
So if you could, is there any particular strategy we should implement in the launching and PPC within Amazon Canada? So what's your experience?
Yeah, and I know now I'm speaking music to your ears, Prabhat, in terms of the marketing side of things. So yeah, like the Canadian market from a marketing standpoint it's absolutely insane in terms of like how cheap it is and compared to everything else. Just given that there's just no competition for the most part, right? So businesses can rank pretty much organically to the front page without a real in-depth launch strategy, unless it's a hyper-competitive market, which on the Canadian, just there's not that many products that are doing so. So a lot of the ones you can rank with very minimal investment into your PPC, just given that the competition is just so low, and there's just not that many people competing on those actual bids. So because that, the approach we usually take is with just a pretty generic marketing strategy, you can get to the first page relatively easily. And we're seeing this across all the major categories, even categories like the baby and home and household. We're not doing a crazy in-depth launch strategy like we would in maybe the US or the UK or in Germany. The Canadian, it's pretty layman, but and I think that's why people like to position as a couple of years back in the US, where you didn't really have to, it wasn't an in-depth launch strategy of a certain CPR giveaway, but now it's really much just put some marketing on, do a little bit more strategic standpoint of how you're driving more people to your listing, and usually that's enough to get to the front page. It almost sounds like a myth in terms of how easy it is, but I think right now, just given that there's so little competition, obviously that's changing really quickly, and we're seeing from the growth of our company, we're right on line of what Amazon Canada is doing. So it's not always going to be like that for bots. So I think in a year from now, we'll have a different conversation. But in the meantime, jump on it when you can, because it's cheap marketing, it's cheap ranking to your front page, and if you can drive additional revenue for your guys' business, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, Blair, you've given us really good information, good insight for somebody to encourage somebody to get started. So if somebody needs to contact you, Blair, where is the best place? Give us your website, email. What's the best place to go to?
Yeah. So and hopefully I'll put it in the section below as well. But it's Amzprepcanada. So amzprepcanada.ca, and it's the whole Canadian forefront. So the shipping, the warehousing, fulfillment, all under one roof. But I'll put my email down below for Bot, so we can also share that as well. If anyone even has questions or wants to chat, I'm always up to talking about Amazon. Me and Provider are doing it much now, so I'm super eager to hopefully just talk to more businesses and hopefully chat about Amazon. So I'm looking forward to it. I appreciate your time, Prabhat. This was amazing.
Thanks very much for talking
more
to us.
businesses.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks very much for talking to us, Blair. All the best.
Thank you so much, Prabhat. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.